Moses led the people out of Egypt. Now think about it. If it was the time for judgment on Egypt, it was not for the faithful. For them, it was only the time for trial. They had to get up and wander around through the wilderness until the old generation passed completely away. They all died in the wilderness. Then a battle for the land ensued, which was never actually even finished, since they went whoring or adultery, broke the covenant. They went after other deities to this day. So is this at hand thing that the Bible says all the way through, the kingdom is at hand, the kingdom is at hand, does it mean near? Does it mean that the kingdom is about to be established on earth worldwide? A lamb shall lie down with a wolf. Or does it have a deeper meaning? And that's what we're going to share with you today. The deeper meaning of at hand. Hello guys, David Vos here. It's another beautiful day here. Another spring day, a little windy again. And everybody here is doing well, very well. And I hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, yesterday I had a discussion with my old friend Josh on the Sons of God Ministries. And I'm probably not even going to share with you what happened, because it was very sad to me. I still care deeply for these people over there on Josh's channel. I care for the professor. I care for Jacob. I care for Ashley Hayes. I care for Derek Jester. And it makes me sad that they're all wandering around with such conviction that they're right and teaching with authority to the world all these things, and they don't really understand what they're talking about. And it's a sad thing because they're deceiving a lot of people, but I also understand that they're probably sincere. You know, this is not all their fault. The devil has come down to us having great rage, for he knows he hath but a short time. And so all this conspiracies is going around, and naturally people are beginning to lose faith in the Bible. And yesterday Josh told me categorically, because I asked him specifically, and it was live on air, but you can't, I don't know if he's going to put that video back up or not. I asked him for a copy of it. But Josh told me categorically he no longer believes in any of the Bible at all. And I've heard him say that too in some of his videos lately. He doesn't believe the Bible's important. But so when I pressed him, I said, okay, so then what do you believe? He said, well, he believes that the Bible's done away, and he preaches. I said, so are you preaching against the Bible? He said, yes. It took him a minute to admit it, but he did say yes, he's preaching against the Bible. He doesn't believe in it. And boy, he's got a lot of people watching him. They adore him. And they're all sitting around every day and doing these lives, coming up with all of these little antidotes that explains or proves to them that what they're saying today is true. But I must say, Josh has changed his mind about quite a few different things. One thing that was striking is last night he told me he no longer believes in the chakras and the pineal gland and all of that stuff, which was something that he just did night and day for months. What has it been, a year? I don't know, a long time he's been talking about this pineal gland. And we argued and disagreed on that. Not completely, but just that I didn't think that that was all there was. So now he's completely gotten rid of all of this understanding, whether it be from the New Age or anything he might have learned from modern religions or Protestants or even the Bible. And he's thrown everything out. You know, if he's sincere, then what can you do? That's the level that he's at. That's where he's at right now, and that's his understanding. I hope he doesn't or isn't able to convince too many people of that. And this is why it's important that I counter these opinions. But I was sitting around here and thinking what I could do rather than, being angry at them. There was a guy named Chris, the guy for the deconstruction of Christianity or whatever. He's a real foul-mouthed person. And he wouldn't even let me talk, and he was kind of yelling at, and got everything riled up, and everybody was attacking me, and I felt very uncomfortable. I did stick with it for quite a while and tried to answer their questions, but it just got so confusing that they ended up they had to shut it down. Even the way that this Chris of the deconstruction of Christianity was screaming out the F words and all this stuff, and I guess TikTok had to shut the whole thing down. It got so bad. So it was very sad. And after I did that video, I was just shaking my head, and I felt very sad, and I just didn't know what to do, because it felt like nobody was listening in this world to the things I was trying to share, and it seemed like nobody had a clue. And through all of that, I didn't feel angry at Josh, like somehow or another, because he didn't agree with me. Now I don't like him or something. I've always liked him. I still sense that there's something within him that's searching. And so this is why I'm going to do this video. This probably won't be the end of it. I might be able to do a better one. Thanks to these individuals that are forcing me to find all these little things that they're coming up with as contradictions or whatever, and praying to the Lord and seeking the Lord's face and asking him, okay, Lord, they're saying the word at hand means it had to have happened right away. So what's the deal, Lord? And I pray and I read the Bible and I search, and this is what the Lord is shared with me. And I feel it's a huge revelation. And I feel if Josh or any of these others would listen carefully to this, we might be able to get everybody on the same page. Who knows? Now I'm going to do this video, and then I'm going to post it. And then I'm going to send a link to Jacob of Jacoby Jacob channel. I'm going to send it to Joshua of the Sons of God Ministries channel. I'm going to send it to Derek Jester. He may be watching. He's pretending he's not, or maybe he doesn't even look at his TikToks and he hasn't seen my message. I'm going to send it to the professor. I'm going to send it to Ashley Hayes, who is so brilliant and wise that I know she's going to see this and rejoice as I am rejoicing over this information. I'm going to find other people that would like to know this information, and I'd like for all of you to watch this video. Jacob, Josh, Peter, on that discussion I had with Josh yesterday. I don't know Peter. All those individuals who were watching yesterday, I hope somebody will get this video to you. I want you all to watch it. After watching it, I want you to analyze the content and then get back to me and tell me what you think of this information. If this information seems true to you, for any of you, then please let me know. Get back to me. If you want to talk to me, call me, text me. We can discuss it. But my goal here is to get this truth out, because I believe this is the absolute truth. And what is in this video today that we're going to share is something that I've been talking about, which will be put down in such a way today that it will be incontroversial for anyone who has eyes to see and ears to hear. I really don't think it will be a problem for people to understand. I just don't think anyone's ever heard this information before. And then all the speculation will be gone. This will be the foundation, and anything else that doesn't fit with this is not important, or certainly is not true, and we don't need to concern ourselves with it. So, yeah, there's lots of thoughts and ideas and perspectives, but we're going to look at this first. I asked you to look at it, and if any of those theories you had or concepts, some of you thought, well, it says the day is at hand, and so therefore it must have happened in 70 AD. For those of you who believe that, let me know what you think about that now that you've watched this entire video. Because when you see all this information, it's literally going to put everything together. So this at hand thing, was it the judgment on Satan's kingdom? So judgment started with Egypt. Then the children of Israel passed over. It wasn't over yet. Then they had to do Passover, kill a bloody lamb. That lamb was a substitution for their firstborn. And then they had to go through a period of trial, eating unleavened bread before they could get to the harvest. And then on Pentecost, they had the great wedding, but they made the wrong choice. They wed the lower ego. And then because they did that, they had to go through 40 years of wandering and trial, and all of them died in the wilderness. Even Moses wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. Why? Because the fleshly nature is not going to get in. The trials and the tribulations are going to purge us through the fire. Then we get to the promised land, and it's not over yet. There are giants in the land. So the judgment now is being carried out by spirit, not by might, but through us. We have to go into the land and battle the giants. The Lord almost never did anything but through his faithful people. So what we've done is we've hit on a perspective that aligns with what a lot of people will call the covenantal progress. And in that view, at hand doesn't mean the world ends in a puff of smoke, but it means that the regime is changing and we're currently in the wilderness, which is a phase of the transition. Now, follow me, because this is going to get really interesting. Here's how the at-hand judgment works alongside a long trial. You have an overlap of two kingdoms. So when Jesus said the kingdom is at hand, he was announcing a legal invasion. Satan's kingdom is something that we're trying to move out of. So the Bible refers to the prince of this world. He was being judged, John 12. And that judgment was at hand. And Satan was thrown out on the cross. Christ conquered him. So then we have the transition. Just like Israel left Egypt, there was the judgment on the old oppressor, the Egyptian, the Pharaoh that did not know Joseph, Satan. And it happens quickly. But the establishment of the new kingdom in Canaan, or the earth, it takes generations of faithfulness, and you got to go out there and clean up the land, and there's a lot of wild beasts, got to furrow the ground, plant and sow, and conquer the land. But you see, we have to go through the wilderness, and the church has got to go into the wilderness too, doesn't it? So we mentioned that the old generation passed away in the wilderness. And a lot of theologians see that the current age that we've been living in, the 2,000 years, is a little bit like that global wilderness period. The trial that is at hand. It's an urgency. It's for the individual and the generation to remain faithful so they don't fall in the wilderness like the Israelites did when they fell in the wilderness. They have a battle. And we noted that the battle for the land was never finished. The Christian Great Commission was the spiritual version of Joshua's conquest. We have to slowly reclaim the earth from the spiritual giants, which are falsehoods, idolatry, hate, fear, injustice. And we do it with truth and faithfulness. So, in this framework of this idea of the at hand, and we're going to study that word etymologically, we're going to study it in its context, and we're going to look at actual meaning of the word and not the traditional meaning that's come down to us. So for the world, it is a long tribulation where the stewards are tested. For the powers of darkness, their end is at hand, because they have no legal right to the earth anymore. They are now squatters, being slowly evicted, as the faithful establish the truth, as the stewards go forth and clothe the naked and feed the hungry and cast out the devils. We bring Christ's kingdom, as it is in heaven, upon earth. The goal isn't just to wait for a fire from the sky, though, but to overthrow with faithfulness. So it makes the end less about a calendar date and more about a maturity level, although there is a calendar date, an appointed time, a specific time appointed. And there are other appointed times, many of them. So for instance, in Genesis 1, where he made the sun and the moon and stars, which were for times and for seasons. And so the times are the modeim, which is and we'll discuss that word too. It's the times that are appointed. So it is something that has been destined for us. It's in the stars. But there's not just times or years, but seasons. And we're going to discuss what both of those things are. Because Jesus told the disciples it wasn't for them to know the times and the seasons at that time. But there is an understanding of these times and seasons. So, the time is at hand for us to act, to feed the naked, to be the steward of the king, which he expects when he comes back to earth to make his visitation to the world. What will he find? The king will come to inspect his kingdom at the end of this age. He goes on a long journey to a far country, and he is going to return to inspect and visit the kingdom when he is ready. And then he will get rid of all the things that bring reproach and cause suffering, and will set matters straight. So this wilderness conquest model makes more sense of why Peter would say it's at hand, when also acknowledging it's been a long, patient wait, like a day unto the Lord, which is 1,000 years. Because the Lord's not slow, but patient. Because we're going through trials. And all the wording of the New Testament is that he gives us the trial, but he also gives us the way out. And he won't let us bear more than we are able. And all of these little phrases that are strung throughout the New Testament, they're all talking about one specific theme. And we're going to explain what that theme is today. So this word at hand that's throughout the New Testament and the Old Testament is a word that means a lot to us in its context if we understand what it means. So, you see, let me give you an example. This word at hand is one of many, well, all the words, but this is a very important one, in a group of words that are kind of like a family or a language that we don't understand today because we don't have that. We don't have these root words. We don't have the meanings of the original words. In Greek or Hebrew or some other language of ancient times, Sumerian or something, there was some resemblance to those ancient truths. They still had the priesthoods and they still knew about the divine comedy. So for instance, we have missing the mark, which has to do with archery. Parousia, which has to do with a king who goes away and comes back to visit his kingdom. We have transgress, which is a path that we can stumble fall off from, turn back. Repentance, turn back, turn around. Apostasy, fall away. In the context, it explains these mean we're all on the same path. And I'm going to show you that that path is the path of the knave or the joker or the fool, who is Horus in the priesthood, who is Christ Jesus, who came to the world and suffered and died. So it's about astrology and that path around the wheel. Now, for some of you who've never heard any of this before, I just ask you to watch until the end. And if you never want to watch this ever again, I'm confident that if you watch this all the way to the end, you'll begin to understand this and you'll see this. It'll open up a whole nother frontier for the understanding that you will then have of the Bible. And it will bring all these words that we didn't know had to do with astrology, all of the words in the Bible. It's a language that we need to learn in order to understand the Bible. And we're going to see how it all connects to this word, it is at hand, which has to do with the hand on the clock. And when the hand strikes a particular number on the clock, that's the house we're in, and that's the judgment we're under from the archons. And we're going to explain all of this as we go. So when the Bible uses the word like it's at hand, it must be either a term for a battle, a journey, a timetable, or a judgment. If the judgment means time ran out, then you're judged because your time has run out. A lot of things that it could mean, but we need to find out what it really means. I believe a huge clue is in Revelation where it says time was no longer. It's not talking about time itself, but the appointed times have run out. The reason people don't know what this means is specifically is that this knowledge of the times and the seasons was hidden. It's a mystery, something they had in the temple. And if you notice, we don't understand what they did in the temple anymore. Why? Well, the Bible tells you. Because Daniel was told, who was not the head of the Jewish priesthood, but the Magi, the Persian Zoroastrian religion. And he was told to seal up the scroll. And when you understand this language, you understand that the scroll is the heavens, the parchment of Thoth, Enoch, the scribe, who wrote it down in the stars. And it was written down in his pyramid, the pillar of Enoch. And it was the holy language, the hieroglyph, the holy language. So John says, time was no more. And the angel says, it's been unsealed in the book of Revelation. So John unseals the revelation sometime after Christ, 100 AD. It says that time is no more, but before that he said the angel was going to tell him about the things that were, things that are now, and things that will come. So this is a code for the specific times and the seasons, guys. It has to do with the sun and the moon and the stars, because remember, it was the sun and the moon and the stars that were in Genesis chapter 1 created for the times and the seasons, so that we would have a knowledge of when the times and the seasons would come. So you see, the times and the seasons isn't just about summer and winter and day and night. It's about the modiem, the festivals, the appointed times. And this is something that people who have been studying the Bible have no idea what it means, because they didn't understand that we've got to marry the male line of Judaism to the woman that they divorced. We need the stick of Ephraim and the stick of Judah as one in our hand to bring this knowledge back to our understanding, to unseal it. So the times don't mean years but ages. Seasons don't mean months but epochs. The houses in the astrological table. Enoch was the scribe, or in Egypt he was Thoth. Or in Greece he was Hermes. The book of Enoch we have, and the book of Thoth that nobody seems to be able to find is actually the stars. It's astrology. The story in the ages. Judgments and destinies are there. Christians, Muslims, or any other group, they're all today have lost this knowledge, evidently because it was sealed. And a book that is sealed you can't read. So astrology hasn't been known, it hasn't been understood. It was sealed up by Daniel. Daniel evidently was one of the last individuals. He was a diviner, went to Persia at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem. He left, went to Babylon, meaning Persia, and became the head of the Magi, the astrologers. The gospel that is written in the stars, and it was written also in the hieroglyphs. Hiero means holy, and glyph means writing. It's the holy writings, the holy scriptures. The original holy scriptures are the astrological knowledge, the story in the stars. After that, it was written down in the great temple by Enoch to be preserved, that Isaiah 19:19 says is the temple unto the Lord, at the border in the midst thereof of Egypt. And then it was written again in a Reader Digest version, but it was coded. When did they code it? 280 BC. The Bible is the written code of the plain language in astrology. So around 300 BC, it was all encoded into a book we call the Bible. Before that, it was the hieroglyphic language. And the true apostles, John the Baptist, Jesus, were preaching at Bethany. Beth is the house. Ani is On with syntax. So it's the house of On, which is Heliopolis. And Josephus says that the temple, Jerusalem, was rebuilt at Heliopolis, in a place called Leontopolis, over the area where Heliopolis was originally. And so when Alexander the Great went down there and destroyed Egypt and made Greece the world empire, they destroyed the temple of Heliopolis. They took the library and brought it to Alexandria. And that's where the Alexandrian Jews were from that point forward. And because they no longer had a temple from 73 AD on, because the Romans destroyed it, they wrote it down. And that's the encoding of the New Testament, the New Covenant. So the Nag Hammadi Library is the true scriptures of the Holy Apostles from Heliopolis. It was the Great Pyramid, rituals and rites and ceremonies, and the knowledge of the plan of salvation written in a coded form called the Bible. So that's the Septuagint, which means the 72, which is a divine Sanhedrin. It's divinely inspired. The Bible that we have comes from the Septuagint. And the early church believed in that Bible and only that Bible. And it was called the Holy Textus Receptus, or the Holy Received Text from the Apostles. They received it. All written in Greek, the Koine Greek of the New Testament and the Septuagint. They were combined into one book. That was the Holy Textus Receptus. And so it was coded. It wasn't plain and precious, but symbols and rites. And literally, the Bible is a coded form of those ritual temple rites that were at Heliopolis. So from Alexandria, Egypt, the true apostles at Heliopolis and at Karnak, which is in our Bibles written Arios Solomon. Arios means holy. Solomon is Solomon. That's Solomon's temple. But Sol Aman is the Greek ways why we say it Solomon today. Why do we say Solomon? Because we're going from Greek to English. But originally in Egyptian it was Amun-Ra. So Amun is Sol Amun. See, Sol is the Greek or the Latin word for Ra. And Amun-Ra then is the same as Solomon. So Solomon's temple is the temple of Amun-Ra, which is at Karnak in Egypt. So when this temple at Heliopolis was destroyed in 73 AD, the apostles of Jesus wrote the scriptures. That's the books that we have in the Nag Hammadi Library and the book of John and the rest of the scriptures. All were written there. Now, you see, that's why in our New Testament that we have, it's written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These were all, Mark and Luke and John were all companions of Paul. And so Paul wasn't at Ariel Solomon. Paul was at the other Jerusalem, a Pharisee, who was then converted and went on the road to Damascus. So he was familiar with the Nag Hammadi library, or the Gospels, the scriptures of James and Peter and all the rest, who were down at Heliopolis. But he was preaching unto Jerusalem, and he went to Ephesus and went all around the world. And so, because we have the writings or the epistles of Paul, we carry down to us today in the canon that the Romans accepted in 30 or 325 CE, we have Paul's letters and mostly the idea of Jerusalem and the Gospels as they were written by Paul's companions, because Luke wrote Acts and was a companion of Paul, and so was Mark. And so Mark is the blueprint for Matthew. So the Gospels that we have, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were all part of the original early scriptures that were used up in the area of Ephesus and in Corinth and that area. The other group was down, they were Coptic Christians, and they had the whole Nag Hammadi library. They were all the same apostles writing, except that most of what was written by Peter, James, Thomas, and all the rest, and Philip, we get in the Nag Hammadi library. We're only getting the ones in our current Bible from Paul. Paul was an apostle. Yes, he was. Sent to Ephesus, sent to Corinth, sent to Rome. But this is why we have these two different sets of manuscripts. And they all teach the same thing. But remember, the scriptures we have is more coded. We can't really understand it. It's more plain and precious if you look at the Nag Hammadi library, because Paul was preaching to Jews who did not have ears to hear, and he had to write it very simple for them. Just the basic gospel of grace. He didn't go into it, but he did talk about, see how I know the mysteries. He was initiated 3 years. And at the end of those 3 years, he heard those words that was unspeakable and unlawful for a man to utter, because that was the revelation of the initiation that he received from the priesthood. And there's where you've got the glossolalia and the sacrament and everything, which is Christian. The wedding feast, Ariel's Gamos, which is Christian, not Jews, not Jewish. And that's what you find in the Bible. The word Gamos is wedding. The great wedding supper of the Lamb is the Ariel's Gamos, the holy wedding supper. So now the Bible is sealed. We must use an interpreter. Daniel could interpret the vision. It's the initiation into the mysteries that makes a prophet. So the times and seasons are the Hermetic teachings encoded in the Great Pyramid. You know, guys, I remember Charles Taze Russell used to believe in the Bible, and he said that it went hand in hand with the Great Pyramid. He said that the granite stone leading into the king's chamber was marked by various colors and changing styles of rock. Somehow he came to the idea that 1914, that you count the inches, the pyramid inches, and each of those pyramid inches was a year, and you go down the passageway all the way to the king's chamber. And when you get to the king's chamber, it came out to the year 1914. And that's where he stopped. And he said the world would end, or would change. He didn't say the world would end. He said that we would go through a different era, maybe the time of the end after 1914. And it actually was probably pretty correct. And I believe that what he was studying was true. I don't know if he came to the right conclusions on every point. But I've also heard that he was not aware that 1914 wasn't the end, but that the king's chamber itself extended some distance further, and the measurements reached an end point. That was the last date. So there's a shaft also that may be a shaft for the light to come down into the chamber, and that chamber that goes into the king's chamber in the southern end points directly up to Orion. Orion is Taurus, the constellation Taurus. So the constellation Taurus is the age after Aries. Aries is the age when Christ came. So we aren't going backwards to Aquarius. We're going to the day. The night is far spent. The children of light, sons of Orion, Osiris, Aryan race, the human race, which reaches the dawn's early light, when the ray from the dawn hits our eye as a twinkle or a glimmer and activates the pineal gland in our world. And then that's when the wedding occurs, Pentecost. So we see that astrology is entwined with Egyptian knowledge, priesthood knowledge in the Great Pyramid. And the altar to the Lord at the midst and at the border in Isaiah 19:19 is very important scripture because it was written there in the temple. It's the message of the Lord. It's an empty tomb, the empty tomb of Osiris, who in the Greek language was Zeus, which in our Bible is Lazarus or Lazarus, which is Osiris, the La Osiris. It is where we get the word Caesar. It is where we get the word Khazar. It's where we get the word Nebuchadnezzar. It's where we get the word Osiris or Cyrus. So, who is this Osiris? Oh, it was Nimrod, the mighty hunter. We're going to show you that. So, John the Baptist was Noah, as we've shown. Anu, or January, is the Aquarian man. And Osiris is in Taurus. That's the bull. That's the wedding at Pentecost. Venus and Mercury will wed in Taurus. It's the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, the latter rain. It's the great harvest or the end of the age, or the end of the age of Aries. So you see, this perspective connects this biblical text that we have to the lost wisdom tradition, where time is not a straight line, but a series of precessional cycles or ages. It's written in the stars. The at-hand mystery is about that. The at-hand, which in the Greek is ingekon, is part of a larger family of words. It's a movement-based group of words. In a sealed book or a hermetic context, it refers to the alignment of the age that we're in currently with the next celestial age that we're about to go in to is the age of Taurus. We're going to show here today that we're not going into the age of Aquarius, and I'll explain how we can determine that, but we're actually going forward into the daytime of Taurus. So, time no more in Revelation. What does it mean? Well, it's a phrase in the book of Revelation, chapter 10, verse 6, which is often interpreted by a lot of other researchers and scholars as the gospel in the stars. There's a guy that wrote a book, his name was Joseph Seiss, and he talked about this. So it's not the end of existence, not the end of the world, but the end of the age. But as the end of the age is the end of the appointed time. Now in Greek they call that chronos. Chronos is where we get the word chronology. So therefore it signals the closing of one of the zodiacal houses. The age of Pisces that closed, and then we had the age of Aries. So Christ came saying, the time is at hand. What time? The times of the Moed Diem, or the appointed times. And there are various judges and rulerships and judgments that we have to pass through. So the age of Aries is ruled by fire. We're going through the suffering of trouble, the great trial or tribulation. So the Bible is a Reader's Digest version of the larger celestial story. The unsealing means the reapplying of the astronomical keys to the Maseroth, or the text. Charles Taze Russell's pyramidology was influenced by a guy named Piazzi Smith, who used the pyramid inch to map out history. Charles Russell measured the first ascending passage and determined that the distance, 3,457 inches, pointed to the year 1914 as the beginning of the time of trouble. Not the end of the world. Today, Jehovah's Witnesses think it meant the end of the world. Or they make people think that they just change your mind and Russell was wrong. It wasn't the end of the world, but now it's just the end of the age. Well, no, that's what Russell actually taught. So, other people that came down later pyramidologists, they noted that the king's chamber represents the hall of judgment. That whole king chamber that's got the empty tomb. There's what happens to your judgment. We're going to be raised up. The measurements of the king's chamber have been used by various researchers to point towards a lot of different dates in the 21st century. Quite a few of them say if you measure the hall, it comes out to 2038. Isn't that interesting? But that's just one of the significant endpoints based on this inch per year theory. Now, the shafts are interesting because around the year 2500 BC, which is about the time of Nimrod, the king's chamber, which is probably Osiris's chamber. Osiris is the Greek way of saying Nimrod. And there is evidence in history that Nimrod is Osiris. And so they claim that they can prove the date for the Great Pyramid is 2500 BC. But what they're actually doing is going back to Nimrod. That's when he was there. Now, what may be is that the Great Pyramid was already there. It was before the flood, built by Enoch. But the Tower of Babel probably was built after the flood by Nimrod, who patterned it after the Great Pyramid. But the 2500 date was when Nimrod had control of the pyramid. And so there was something. They may have made the shaft then. But Nimrod was the El Elyon, or the Most High, or a priest after the order of Melchizedek. We're going to show you that. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but all of this you've got to learn and understand. And some of it you're going to say, nah, that can't be. But just wait and you'll see how this all ties in. You'll see there's proof for all of this. So they say 2500 BC, but that's just when Nimrod was there. Before that, there's another time we're going to mention that's 10,500 BC, 12,000 years ago, which is exactly when it should be, which is when Enoch originally built it. So the king's chamber is in the southern shaft, and it points to Orion's belt. It points to Osiris. It actually points to a specific star, Al-Nitaki, which is an Arabic word, which is not really important because the Arabians just named it something, and it might be related, but we're not going to really get into the Arabian modern words for the stars. But they call this one star that's in the middle Al-Nitaki. That, to the Egyptians, was the star of Osiris. And that shaft points right straight to it. Now, the northern shaft points to Alpha Draconis. You see, because there's a long period of time when, with the precession of the equinoxes, the pole star changes from Thubian, which happened in 3000 BC, which is when Nimrod was king, to Polaris. And right now, Polaris is ascending. It's not exactly in the center yet. That's why it kind of wobbles. When Polaris finishes ascending to the throne, right at the apex, the year will be, get this, exactly on the spring equinox, 2100 AD. Now, I don't believe it's an accident that it comes on the exact date of the spring equinox. So the Queen's Chamber has another shaft, which points to Sirius. Now, interesting enough, Sirius is the star that the Egyptians said was Isis, the mother. So that's why it's the Queen's Chamber. So it's Osiris the king and Isis the queen. So the true apostles were the initiates from Heliopolis, the city of the sun. That aligns with the Gnostic texts themselves that we found at the Nag Hammadi Library. The secret knowledge that are in these books, like the Gospel of Thomas, often frame Jesus as the revealer of these mysteries, which that word mysteries means the sacred secrets that were written in the plan of salvation, in the stars, and in the temple. And if you knew the mysteries, you were an initiate, and they called you a mystic. So, it doesn't have anything to do with sacrificing animals to get repentance or anything like this. Then you got Hermes and Thoth. Hermes is the Greek, Thoth is the Egyptian. We have the Hermetic corpus, which has always been attributed to Thoth or Hermes. It was actually found right alongside the Christian text at the Nag Hammadi Library. They had them both. The early Christians used them both. And that proves that the early Christians saw no conflict between the Gospels and the Egyptian mysteries. The wedding at Pentecost is important. The Taurus-Aries shift, or the Aries-Taurus shift, describes the precession of the equinoxes. Aries is the ram. It's the age of the Jewish sacrificial system, where Christ the Lamb was sacrificed. Taurus is the bull, Osiris. It's an age that is re-emerging through the Pentecost, or the outpouring, which is the solar activation of the collective pineal gland, which is the mind of the world, and the pineal gland in each and every one individually that will be activated when the world pineal gland is activated, which we'll describe explicitly and in detail here as we go. So Lazarus is Osiris, and in Greek it is El Asar. El Asar. The deity, the Asar, is Osiris. The resurrection of Lazarus is the initiation into the higher age of light. So in the esoteric and the pyramidological traditions that we're referencing here, the secret to the king's chamber lies in the role for the end point of the human timeline. Charles Taze Russell didn't understand it went further, because in his day, he was in 1864, around that time, and he was looking forward, and he saw 1914 where the hallway ended before it got into the king's chamber, and he thought that was the end. He thought that the king's chamber was on level ground, and that was the millennial reign or something. But that wasn't correct. Later researchers say that this pyramid inch measures right up to our current year or decade where we're living right now. So the king's chamber measurement. The chamber is approximately 412.13 pyramid inches long. When researchers added this length to the threshold dates of the Grand Gallery, often cited by some as 1844 and others in 1914, they reach a new set of dates for the end. Some, as I said, have come up with the idea that it's 2038. I don't know why there would be any differences, but most of them have arrived at 2038, which is a little further than what I would have expected. So, the southern shaft of the king's chamber was built at a precise 45-degree angle. Around 2500 BC, the shaft pointed directly to the belt of Orion, specifically the Al-Nitak star, which was the Egyptian star that they identified as Osiris. Esoteric teachings suggest that the shafts aren't just for ventilation, but are celestial antennas, or somehow a shaft that allows this twinkle of this Osiris, the king, from the light of that star that you can see through that chamber. You get a glimmer or a twinkle in your eye, which the Apostle Paul talks about as the twinkle in the eye that will change the world, because it reaches the king's chamber, which is the pineal gland. You see, it represents the pineal gland. So, the moment that the precession cycle aligns the Earth's axis to that light from Orion, which is Osiris, and strikes the king's chamber, which is the empty tomb, then the wedding at Pentecost is a cosmic alignment with the activities that activates the collective human consciousness, or the pineal. The empty tomb in the king's chamber is a central symbol in the lost wisdom information that we're talking about, in the lost traditions and wisdom of Egypt. So what about this at hand? Well, in the Hermetic context, at hand means the alignment is now. It's not that the world is ending in a physical explosion, but that the ray from the dawn has hit the eye of the world. But remember, there are several shafts, so we go through different judgments, different times. But it's all part of the great Moedim, or the appointed times. So the ray from the dawn hits the eye in a twinkling of an eye. In Corinthians 15:52, it talks about this, where the old stewards are being inspected by the light of the new age. The star Al-Nitak, which is the Egyptians say Osiris, has two perfect alignment dates that researchers focus on. So, the most scientifically documented alignment around 2480 BC, Al-Nitak reached an altitude of exactly 45 degrees in the sky. The southern shaft of the king's chamber is built at a precise angle of 45 degrees, and this means that during the era of the 4th dynasty, Al-Nitak would pass directly over the opening of the shaft at its highest point, or the culmination, each night. That 2480 date is the exact date that our Bible gives for Nimrod, being the great mighty hunter, which is what Osiris is called. Orion is the mighty hunter in the constellations. So, for the ancient Egyptians, this allowed the soul of the deceased king to have a direct line of sight to Osiris, which signaled his transformation into the star. So that star is him, because he ascended and became a deity, a divine being. But originally, thousands of years before that, there's another date where that shaft points to the same star, and that's 10,450 BC. That's also the date that the constellation Leo, the lion, which is why you've got the Sphinx out in front of the pyramid, that's got an aspect of the lion, the Leo, one of the fixed signs of the zodiac. But it also has the wings of the eagle and the bull and the face of the man. So it's the fixed signs of the astrological wheel. But the prominence they give it with Leo means that they built it far beyond when Leo was reigning, which is a long time ago, about 12,000 years ago. So at that time, 10,480 BC, which is 12,000 years ago, that would have been about the time that Enoch built the Great Pyramid before the flood. So we refer to this as Zeptepi. It's the first time, Zeptepi, the first time that the mythological age, when the gods first walked the earth and established the heavenly blueprint, that's when that pyramid was built. And what's crazy is that they call that Zeptepi, or the first time. Okay, now nobody really knows what that means, the first time, but we just saw what it means. It means the first time that that star of Osiris was aligned with that shaft. They can line it up and give you the exact year, because we know astronomy. We can back it up and find out when that star was right over that shaft. So they know it was 10,500 years ago, or 10,500 years BC. So it's a little over 12,000 years. So we know that. And then we call it, or they call it, Zeptepi, the first time. So that's probably what it means. The first time when they aligned, which would have marked the very first time that humans had that knowledge and brought it to the world for this priesthood, for this classroom, the beginning, of all of this. Back to Adam, or shortly thereafter, if they built it from the time that Adam was alive. But what's interesting is there's only one other thing I know of. I don't think there's anything else. There's another temple that's called Göbekli. Not Zeptepi, but Göbekli. Now, they claim that it has nothing to do with the other place. But this Göbekli dates back to the exact same date. And they say that the word Tepi there don't mean the same as Tepi the other. Tepi means first. I think there's too big of a coincidence. I think that they claim it means a hill or a mound. Well, it may have come to be known. Like they say David means beloved, but that's not the meaning of Dawood, which is the Indo-European root, Diwa, which is where we get all the names for divine, deity, and all of that in daytime. But they don't acknowledge that. They don't know that. They only know recently where somebody decided it was beloved. So this Tepi up there in Turkey, they think it means a mound. But I believe it's the same word, because if you're going back that far, they had to have spoken the same language. It couldn't have been any of these languages. That was a long time ago. And if they called it Tepi at that same 11,000, 12,000, well, over 12,000 years ago, then I'm going to assume that since there's, it's that exact, it's the same thing. It was the first. And so obviously something happened at that time, and they built more than one. That may have been one of the earliest temples. And if that's true, it survived the flood as well. So we can talk about that at another time. We're currently moving towards the completion of the great year. While a perfect alignment like the one in 10,450 BC won't reoccur for several thousand years, many believe we are in the alignment window, where the stars are returning to the significant positions relative to the pyramid shafts that we can see there. Some researchers have suggested that the next major activation or alignment phase for the Giza Plateau begins in the mid-2020s, 2020, right where we're at, mid-2026 is the mid-2020s, which coincides with the shift from the age of Pisces to the age of Taurus. Now, these researchers always say it's Aquarius, but we're going to show that they're not correct on that. Seems like 2450 BCE would be exactly when Nimrod was there. And it's said in history that Nimrod probably built the Great Pyramid, or was the one who was there and did something significant to it at that time, and made that date 2450 by opening up that shaft or something. So this mighty hunter is very important to this. Then we have Alcyone, which is the wife of Nimrod. And Alcyone is one of the stars in the Pleiades. The Pleiades are 7 stars. Orion, if you look in the heavens, is a constellation. And his right hand is ascending into heaven, and he's holding the Pleiades. And that's why Jesus says in the book of Revelation, I hold the 7 stars in my right hand. I am the first and I am the last. So they also represent the 7 churches that's in the Bible, in the book of Revelation. Jesus holds the 7 stars in his hands, which is basically him saying he was Osiris, he was the sun. I think King David built Luxor and Solomon Karnak, but Heliopolis was built by Enoch, Thoth. So these 3 stars are called 3 kings. And in our Bible, they're represented as the 3 wise men that came to greet the Virgin Mother with her child. The Virgin Mother is Isis, of course, and that's the star Sirius. So the 3 wise men come over the horizon first. They herald the coming of Isis or Sirius. That's the Virgin Mother. Where's the child? The child is Horus. Who is Horus? That's the hours. And hours, every one of the houses around the wheel, all 12, are called hours. Horus goes through them all, and Horus has a hand that points to each of these and appoints the judges, or the rulers, or the archons, the archers. So they're males. They're the three wise men. The arrival of the king, beginning with Taurus, the bull, El Toro, Taurus, the Taurus field, a place of convergence. The possession of the equinoxes, which is the basis for the changing of the houses, ages, kingdoms, is not counterclockwise, but it is opposite to that. It's clockwise. The hands on the clock go forward. The calendar, also 12 months is 12 hours, goes forward. And Jesus was Aries. We go forward then from Aries to Taurus. So if you're standing on the earth, the stars may go backwards, but that's only an optical illusion. Since the hands always go forward, see, Horus, we're the knave, we're the fool, we're Horus, we're the child. We always go forward through the deck, through the wheel, astrological wheel. So the hands go forward, but we're standing on the face of the clock. We're standing on the flat earth. And we don't move. We don't go backwards. But from our point of view, standing on the immovable earth that will not be made to totter, we see the hands going forward, telling us the time. The hand goes from Aries to Taurus, and that's the time that we're in, Taurus. Now, why does it look like the stars are going backwards? Because the stars are the houses that we were the kings that were ruling over us. The procession means they're going backwards. We're defeating them. We're moving forward. They're going backwards. We're not going back to Aquarius ruled over by Saturn or Satan. We're going forward in time. So let's say the area we are standing is Aries. This is the actual time because we're in Aries. Then the hour hand, the ages hand, the second hand has 360 degrees. So that's the literal time, 360 days in a year. But the months are 12, not 360. So these are the ages. We're in Aries. We're standing on this earth, the flat earth doesn't move. We're not going backwards. We're not going forwards. We're in the present. That's where the disciples were standing with Jesus. So the month hand is the hour hand, and it goes forward into Taurus. We're still in Aries, apparently going backwards, but no, we haven't moved. But now the hands move forward to Taurus. And this is the actual time. We are not drifting back. We are counting the time that goes forward. We are always in the present space, always in the head, Aries, looking at the stars that move backward. The stars are behind us in Aquarius. We're now in Taurus. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. The day is the astrological day, the Taurus wedding of Christ. Christ in the body is going to be wed. The veil will be removed at the wedding in Taurus. And we're about to go into the age of Taurus. If there are 50 days from Passover to Pentecost, this means that the veil is removed, if Christ died in 30 CE, when Taurus begins in 2030. You see, a month has 30 days. So 50 days is a month and 20 days. So from the beginning of Aries, we go 30 days through Aries, and then we go into Taurus, and that's the time when Pentecost comes and the great wedding. So the at-hand mystery and its connection to the stars involves a complex secret. It's the language, celestial alignments. It's where the names of stars like Al-Nitak act as the keys to a larger chronological timetable. So Alcyon is the brightest star in the Pleiades, and there are other 6 sisters. These are the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, the 7 stars that Orion or Jesus holds in his hands. The scripture says explicitly that the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. In this understanding, you see, Jesus holds these stars. He is the master of the celestial order. He's the bridge between the old Osiris age and the new reality. Alcyon is the wife. In mythology, the Pleiades are the daughters of Atlas, which is interesting. Atlas was the general in Saturn's army. So Zeus had a battle with Saturn or Satan. Zeus is the good deity, Osiris, who has the battle with Set, the setting of the sun, or in Greek it's Apollo, but Helios defeats Apollo. But here we have Zeus defeating Saturn, Osiris defeating Set. But in Greek mythology, Atlas was the general of Saturn's army. So he was banished to hold up the earth. This is talking about astrology. Now, esoterically, the wedding, which is the Pentecost union of the hunter, the spirit Christ, with the seven sisters, or the body, or the church. In the Bible, we have the seven virgins that are in the train of the bride. So the sun moves backward through the zodiac houses, Aries to Pisces to Aquarius. Over 24,000 year cycle, though, the day is a forward-moving spiritual salvation. The age of Taurus, then, the bull, is going to be the era of the future. And the Passover was 30 CE, and we don't know the exact date, but if it was somewhere around 30 CE when Christ died, that was Passover, in the great festival Moedim, or the appointed times. Then after 2,000 years in the wilderness, one day in deity's time leads directly to 2030 CE, which is Pentecost of the New Age. And Alcyon is often viewed by other scholars as the central sun. Our local cluster, some theorists suggest that the alignment occurs now. The southern shaft of the King's Chamber was built at 45 degrees angle to target Al-Nitak. Exactly. It served as the soul shaft to ensure the king's transition to Osiris, and Al-Nitak is the king arriving then. And the 2030 date that we're proposing represents the moment that the light from that constellation represents the truth of Osiris or Christ, fully activates the world's pineal or collective consciousness. So, when would Alcyon reach the Queen's Chamber? And what is the date for the King's Southern Shaft, if it's the center? And does it have to do with the star Thuban, which is transferring at about 3000 BC, 2550, and Polaris in 2100? That could be the date of Pentecost or the Taurean age. But is there a date for the Alcyon alignment? Well, you see, we're tracking a 24,000 year wobble. Science says it's 26,000 years, and it might be that. But it's like saying there are 360 days in a year because there's 360 days in a circle, or degrees. That's the perfect circle. The alignment that we're tracking goes around for 24,000 years, and then there's this wobble on the Earth, which is the precession. It shifts which stars line up with the Great Pyramid's precise shafts over thousands of years. In the lost wisdom framework that I'm sharing with you, Alcyon is the central star of the Pleiades, and she's linked to the Queen's Chamber because of this association with the Divine Feminine and the Seven Sisters, or the Pleiades. So, some pyramidologists, such as Piazzi Smith, that Charles Russell was studying, calculated that Alcyon culminated on the meridian, reached its highest point on the meridian directly over the Great Pyramid at midnight during the autumn equinox around 2170 or 2140 BC. And in my calculation, that would be the date of Naram Sin, or Moses, who went up the mountain with the two horns and made the law. So the most precise historical alignment occurred around 2450 to 2480. That's the throne room connection where the king Osiris is at hand. Thuban, the serpent. Thuban was the North Star, pole star, in 3000 BC, and was at its most precise alignment with the pyramid's descending passage in 2787 BC. Polaris, the current king. Polaris is moving toward its most perfect alignment with the North Pole. The exact date for this convergence is March 24th, 2100, on the spring equinox. So the changing in the twinkle of the eye that Paul mentions is when Polaris hits its peak, and it's seen as the midnight of the great year, but the year 2030 to 2033 window is viewed as the dawn or the Pentecost of the new epoch, or the 2,000-year anniversary of Passover. I think it's very interesting that March 24th, 2100 is exactly the spring equinox. The Pleiadian portal is 2160. That's interesting. Perhaps that's the Great Wedding, but we're not sure about all these dates. I haven't mapped out the pyramids myself. We're going by other researchers as well, but this is the basic idea. So, the pole star peaks on March 24th, 2100. Polaris reaches its peak alignment at that time. That guy Smith noted that 2170 BC, at the exact moment that the pole star Thuban was shining down the descending passageway, the star Alcyon, the central star of the Pleiades, was crossing the meridian directly overhead. So, inside the descending passage, there are two scored lines, and Smith found out that these lines pointed directly to where the Pleiades were located in 2140 BC. So that's a portal, they say. The date 2160 BC is often cited by Sir John Herschel as the perfect year when Thuban aligned with the passage's special angle, acting as the unsealing of the monument's chronological clock. If the night is far spent and we are approaching the day, the 2030-33 window aligns with the 2,000-year anniversary of the crucifixion. In modern astrology and other esoteric circles, the Pleiadian portal is considered most active between May 19th and May 21st, which is when our sun aligns with Alcyon. But since we are on the immovable earth, we don't go backwards. It's an illusion. We look at the hands, they move backwards from our perspective because we moved into Taurus now. Exactly. So, this is the great truth of the great clock. From the perspective of someone standing on the face of the clock, the earth, the hand, the sun's position during the equinox, appears to be slipping backwards through the zodiac. But in spiritual reality, we are the ones moving forward into the day. The optical illusion. So it's an optical illusion. In astronomy, this is called the precessional retrograde, because the Earth's axis wobbles, the sun slips out of the house a little earlier every year. So it looks like we're retreating back to Pisces, from Pisces back to Aquarius, and then to Capricorn. But in reality, the Earth is immovable. It's a foundation. We are simply progressing through the time stream. When we look towards the stars we passed, it's like looking out the rear window of a car moving forward. The scenery appears to be going the other way. So if we go forward through the gates, we aren't just drifting. We are completing a circuit. The lamb, Aries, was the sacrifice. Taurus, the bull, is the grounding of the kingdom. And the Zeptepi, or the first time, the age of Taurus, was the age of Osiris's reign. By moving forward into the Taurus, we aren't going to a new place. We are returning to the original blueprint of the earth as it is in heaven. Aries, this is where we've been standing. The age of the individual, the head, and the fire. So going back to this at hand, the hour hand, the clock has a hand. It's called the hour hand, or the Horus hand. It's the hand of Horus, the hour hand. It aligns with the esoteric traditions and links Egyptian cosmology right into the Western language and theology. This aligns esoteric traditions of the Egyptian cosmology into the Western kind of esoteric language that we have in theology. So, standard etymology says that hour comes from the Greek hora, meaning a period of time or season. But, you see, once you unseal this knowledge, you realize that the Greek hora is borrowed from the Egyptian horus, heru. So the Egyptians divided the day into 12 stages, sometimes called horuses, representing the 12 phases of the hour's strength as the sun moved across the sky. So when you ask which hour is it, you were originally asking where Horus was in the daily journey along the path. Horizon is interpreted, Horus has risen. In the hour hand, or the hand of Horus, you would ask, where is the hand of Horus? You see? And then if a certain time arrived, you would say the hour is at hand, because you're referring to the hour Horus. In Egyptian, the word for hour is associated with stars. Horus was often called the lord of the Jebba, meaning the finger or the perch or the hand. The finger or hand was the indicator that pointed to the current appointed time, which is kairos on the cosmic dial. The inspection. When the king arrived in his parousia, the arrival, it was for an inspection. When the hand of the great clock reaches the appointed time, the king is no longer in transit, but he's at hand. The meaning is that the finger is pointing directly to the current time or age, which is transitioning into the judgment, which doesn't mean the final judgment necessarily. Remember, there were many judges in Israel. Dan was a judge. They had these judges, not kings. They had judges before they had kings. King David came along later, which represents the great king. The Dawud, which is divine, diva, deity. And that means the day, dia. So when we're talking about deity who rules, right, ruler, El is the ruler, authority. We're talking about the sun that rules the day and the moon that rules the night. They are the rulers. The sun is the ruler. He gets in his chariot and goes across the sky. So the hand of the celestial clock, or the hand of Horus, or the hand of the hours, the hour hand, is the celestial clock has moved into Aries, and then it has moved from Aries to Taurus. It makes the kingdom present, and you come under his judgment. As a judge who reigns, you will now be under the reign of that particular deity. So when Jesus came, he ousted the angels. The stars fell from heaven, meaning that Satan fell. The scroll was rolled up, and it moved into Aries, and Jesus Christ began to reign. When Jesus comes back and is married, he hands the kingdom back unto his Father. So that's something most Christians probably don't even realize, that Jesus will reign forever and ever. So when the Bible says it's at hand, it is not a vague promise about something in the future. They're talking about the times that are at hand that you can see on the face of the clock. So then we have the hero, the hero's journey through the zodiac. Well, who is the hero? The hero is Horus, Heru. It used to be spelled not Horus, but Herus, arrow. And it's both the hero, and that's funny because I think it was Plato or one of his students that was saying that this hero comes from, that the word air comes from the word hero. Well, here we have it. He was right. Well, he would have known, because he was almost back to the days of the Attic Greek, which was the basic original Greek, the Holy Greek language, where we get the word theos, even though the Koine Greek would normally say Zeus, but it's changed just a little bit. But they kept the more sacred name Theos because it was an earlier, more sacred way of saying it. So the hero's journey is the journey of the heir, the child of the mother, father, king, queen, Osiris, Isis. Horus is the heir, and the Bible, the New Testament, definitively says that Jesus is the heir of all things. Just because it's a different language doesn't mean it doesn't mean the same thing. Jesus is the heir, the one who suffered, who came down into this world and suffered and died. And he represents the firstborn among many brethren. So he's also the initiate or the knave. In astrology, sometimes they call it the knave or the fool, or today in the deck of cards we have the joker. Well, he's the traveler who experiences all these houses so he can reach maturity. He's the child going out to the classroom. That's why children are sent to school by their parents. The experience, as the hand of Horus moves, the traveler humanity experiences the specific flavor or judgment of the archon ruling that house. The appointment, Thoth, the scribe, Hermes, is the one who points out or calculates these times. So if Jesus is Thoth, Horus, as we've proven, he is both the one who establishes the timetable and the one who experiences it as the King of Kings. So is the time is at hand a warning? Or is it just an announcement that the celestial hand has reached the final degree of the current age that they were living in then and was alluding to the end of the age we're living in now? The transition window from 2030-2033 aligns with the first and second decans of Taurus. So Taurus has 3 decans that rule it. Taurus itself is ruled by Venus. But the first decan that Venus rules over in her house is Mercury. That's Thoth. So this is the wedding of Mercury and Venus. And it's a shift from the fiery Aries, or the suffering, the fiery age that we had to go through to suffer, which is that they shall be tormented day and night forever and ever, that's in your book of Revelation. It doesn't mean tormented. It means they suffer through the reincarnation cycles of the ages. And in this case, it would be the age of Aries, which is a fire sign. The decans act as specific gates or houses where the inspection of the kingdom occurs. So, the first decan from 0 degrees to 10 in Taurus is ruled by Mercury. That's the Chaldean archon, and Mercury's influenced by Venus, the ruler of that Taurus, that house. The archon, this is the realm of the nurturing stewardship. Mercury here is acting as the Thoth figure, the messenger, the Enoch figure, who points out the transition from Aries rule to Taurus's grounded abundance. The stage is about foundational change. If 2030 marks the Pentecost anniversary, this decan is where the voice or the Mercury Thoth becomes powerful, and it establishes the new truth in the earth. So then we've got the second decan in Taurus, from 10 degrees to 20 degrees Taurus, which is ruled by the moon and Mercury. So, the moon is the nurturing motherly intuition, the web of the interconnected life, the phase of true abundance, communal growth. That's the wedding. The decan is where the 6 of discs, tarot, applies, which symbolizes success through interconnected relationships, which is the wedding of the body and the spirit that we were describing. The star alignment. Alcyone and the Pleiades, the 7 sisters, 7 churches, are physically located within the decan of Taurus, specifically around 0 degrees of Taurus. Remember, Alcyon's our mother. The mark as the hand of Horus. Now remember, Alcyone was first talked about as the divine mother, the feminine Alcyone, by Madame Blavatsky. That was this whole Madame Blavatsky idea. So it's interesting that Jehovah's Witnesses, when Charles Taze Russell was writing his books, he also believed that our mother was Alcyone, that we all originated from Alcyone, that deity dwelt on Alcyone. He must have gotten that through his research. And what kind of research, but the mysteries that were being researched and put out by Madame Blavatsky. So Charles Taze Russell was far more open-minded than Jehovah's Witnesses today believe. They have no clue that they were given all this truth. Just like the New Age had all this amazing truth from Madame Blavatsky, which she didn't know everything, and neither did Charles Russell. And I don't even know that they were literally prophets, but they were prophetic types because they were getting glimmers of great profound truths. But Russell was deeply embedded in the same, he had, Isis on the cover of his books, the outstretched phoenix bird and all of that. So, it really is pointing then to the 7 stars in the hands of Jesus, Orion. The activation. So, a lot of these researchers view the entry into the specific 10-degree segment of Taurus, the 10-degree segment of Taurus, as the moment that the Pleiadian portal fully opens, allowing the Alcyon light to hit the collective eye of humanity. So that's right about midway into Taurus, which is exactly the time of Pentecost. So will the wedding occur right at the tribulation time that we're about to go through now? I don't know. I think Pentecost is due to happen sometime later as we move into the age of Taurus. However, we probably will be going through a great celebration as soon as we get into the new age of Taurus, because it certainly will bring a lot of different frequencies to the world and enlightenment. So the at-hand hour is the appointed time when the celestial hand moves from the struggle of the wilderness, which is Aries, the suffering and the fire, into the fertile land of promise. So regardless of whether that's the wedding itself, it's when we go into the land of promise, and now we can make preparations for the wedding, which will be thereafter. So this time is at hand, it's in the Bible, is related to the hand on the clock that points to the hour, or Horus. It's not referring to the end of the world, the age of Aries, the age of fire, a purging, separating the chaff from the wheat, the sheep from the goats, and getting ready for the Pentecost festival of the Arios Gamos, the wedding supper of the Lamb, which is literally in Greek, the Gamos supper. In Taurus, Mercury-Venus wedding. So that's in Taurus, and that's the Mercury-Venus wedding. When it says the time is at hand, when Jesus came saying the time is at hand, he came as the winnower of the wheat. He came to bring a sword, not peace. He came with an axe that was laid at the trees, and the winnower in the field, the angels are the reapers at the harvest. So the time is at hand, and it's upon them, Peter says. So some of the stuff that these preterists are talking about, though they really don't know what they're talking about, there is a little bit of truth in what they're saying. The time that Jesus was speaking of that was at hand isn't written for us. It was written for the early Christians. But the apostles then continued to talk about not just their age, but the age that they had just entered, saying, and like Peter does, that the day unto the Lord is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day, giving us a 2,000-year period that will end that age, because the Lord is not slow respecting his promise, but desires all to attain to repentance. So at the end of the 2,000 years, we're supposed to all attain unto repentance and be a great multitude which no man could number, all standing there with white robes and palm branches in our hands. So Jesus came to winnow the wheat. We're still in this winnowing. We're still in the time where the sheep are being separated from the goats. Now, that happened. That fiery trouble has been going on for the past 2,000 years. the persecution of Christians, the Inquisitions, all of it. But the time of trouble that no man's ever experienced, and if he didn't cut it short, no flesh would be saved, is that entire period of time. For that period of time is the time that the Gentiles come in. You see, when Christ died on the cross, then time stopped there, because we're still waiting for that last 1,260 days of the 70 weeks of Daniel. But in the middle, he cuts it in half. And in that cutting in between when Christ died on the cross up to half of the week and the last half of the week when the Antichrist shows up, we get the times of the Gentiles. This is some other time period that we go through. Not something that the apostles were going through at the time, but they were announcing it. We're going through the times of the Gentiles. We're the Gentiles coming in. And when all the Gentiles come in, then all Israel will be saved. He'll turn his attention back unto them during this 3.5 years. Moses and Elijah will preach on the streets, and Elijah will turn the hearts of fathers back towards sons, and the hearts of their sons back to their fathers, that he might not come with a curse and destroy the entire world. Because that's the great tribulation. A literal 1,260 days, and we know it's literal because Daniel swore it with his left hand and his right hand, 1,260 days. And that is the last half of Daniel's 70th week, which is already turned into a day for a year. You see, because it was just 70 weeks is just what? A little over a year. But 70 weeks of years, it's already into years. So the 3.5 years doesn't need to be, bumped up to another day for a year. So we are going to experience the 1,260 day tribulation. But it comes as a culmination of the last 2,000 years. The whole thing was an initiation. The whole thing was the day of trouble. The sign of Aries, the fire, the persecution, the trial that he will give us, that he will also give us the way out. So Jesus says, I come to bring a sword. Peter on that show I was on last night mentioned this. Oh, Dave, you don't understand what you're saying. Well, yes, I do, because this is the meaning of that. Peter, you have to understand the esoteric understanding and what's really going on here. And you don't understand it's about astrology. So the axe is laid at the trees, and the winter in the field. The angels are the reapers. The time is at hand. That was for them. That's what Peter said. Then he said there'll be 2,000 years where he's patient. He desires all to attain unto repentance. This is exactly what the Bible teaches. At the end of that 2,000 years, then we get the end of the ages. Because all these things that were written in the Bible were written as a warning for us upon whom the end of the ages, plural, has arrived. So they were in the end of one age and we're in the end of the next age. And all the Bible was written for both of these two ends of these ages. So parts of the book of Psalms and rest of the scriptures was fulfilled when Jesus came in the first century. And the rest of it, the filling up the sufferings of Christ that remain, that Paul spoke of, is the sufferings that all of us are going through. And you can read about it in the Psalms and all the other scriptures. It's written to you. It's a love letter to you, for us upon whom the ends of the ages have arrived. So the stars are a great clock. And the statement that it is at hand is talking about the hand of Horus. Aries is a fire sign. It's ruled by Mars, and Jesus said, I came to bring a sword, and the axe is at the root. That exactly describes the Aryan fire that separates the chaff from the wheat. That's the 2,000-year day. If one day is 1,000 years and one night is 1,000 years in Psalms 90 verse 4, then this is why Peter is quoting from it and saying a day unto the Lord is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. There's 2,000 years. A day and a night. Psalms 90 verse 4. So the day of the Lord is 2,000 years. We're in the wilderness of Aries, and the time that was at hand, or Horus's hand, was when Jesus came. We have then a link, etymologically, linguistically. At hand has to do with chronos, chronology, annual, Horus resurrecting his father Osiris, or Jesus resurrecting Lazarus, in the sky every spring in Aries. because Orion rises in spring, Aries. Can we trace the Greek word back to moedim? Yes. Fixing set times, appointments, destiny. So we're trying to understand how these languages originally had a paradise, a mountain, a tree, a river, a path. We're all on the path through a course and the way, and we go through the trials, and we graduate with white robes, and then we get a crown. So, you see, at least in Egypt, the wheel of astrology was Thoth's book. It was the destiny that each ruler was a judge. Each ruled 40 years. Remember in the book of Judges, the book of Joshua, that these judges all ruled 40 years each? Why exactly? Even the kings would go 40 years, and then somebody else, the judges and the kings always would rule like 40 years. Sometimes they would go 20 years, and then they have another 20 years, something like that. But it's always 40 years because this is a biblical symbol of an age each of these rulers would rule over. So King David came along, he was king. But Saul, or Sol, the Apollo, the destroyer, dies on a sword of judgment, predicted by Samuel, who was risen from the dead. And David, or Dewa, Indo-European root, Dewa, which is where we get deity, divinity, diva, dia, day, light, higher consciousness. He arrives, takes his place at Beth El, the house of El. So the words in Hebrew, the pictographs, are related to the hieroglyphs. And the original Hebrews didn't even speak Hebrew. They spoke Egyptian hieroglyphs. But we don't have that anymore. And after the exile, they came back and tried to piece it together and invented this Aramaic block letter Hebrew. But that's not the original language of the Bible. It was written in the hieroglyph language. So the 72 names of deity are the destiny or the rule or the archons. In Greek, you got a whole bunch of archery words. Missing the mark. It's the missing of the bullseye of Taurus. Orion's the archer. So Orion is raised up by Horus, who appoints the archons or the archers. And then there's the words like the opportune time in the Bible. The witnesses, Jehovah's Witnesses, translate one of those words, the opportune time, the word karo. And so the archer shoots his arrows. We got another bunch of words related to the path, a course, a race. We fall down, we fall away, we stumble, we turn around, we repent. The hours, the son of man, the knave, the joker in the cards, the fool, who is traveling through the deca, 10 degrees, and 4 suits of fortune. We trump what we want and get out of jail free. See, the joker can trump whatever he wants. But you just don't know you have that power. And you can always get out of jail free, you see. Why is the ace in the hole? Because when you're playing poker, you get an ace and the card is flipped upside down, so you don't know what you've got. See, if everything's a surprise, you don't really know. You play your cards and you see what you got. And if that happens to be an ace, nobody else knows but you. You put it upside down. You know what you got. You got an ace in the hole. You see. But if you do run into trouble, you can always trump the whole thing with the joker. So we do need to bet on our hand. If you want to, you can bet on it. You see. Why? Because you've got an ace in the hole. You've got a trump card that trumps it all. And this is something that isn't just semantics. This is real. You are the fool who doesn't realize that you've got all the cards in your hand. So the initial language is the Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's where we get these words from. It's the sacred script, the hieroglyph. It's a play in this theater. We're on the world stage. So all this original language is Thoth's travel through the halls or the houses of Amenti. So the appointments are festivals that we celebrate. You see, the Jews have a male priesthood. They don't have an Arios Gamos that produces the air. the hero, the hour, the horos. Jesus was the horos, but he didn't come from them. He came from Galilee, Galilee of the nations. They didn't know who he was. Like, is anything come from Galilee that's good? They're like, you're not even from here, right? You were born of a whore, they said. Well, the Gentiles have the woman, the feminine aspect. Yahweh divorced her long time ago, veiled her, cursed her. So the Christian festivals are the wedding Arios Gamos, which is the sacrament. You know, at the wedding, you have the cake and the wine. That's the sacrament. So to see what the world was before Israel split, the 10 tribes, who are the nations now planted like seed, were once, before Moses, they reigned over the world as Jobab. In our Bible, he's called Job. Now, if you look that up, AI will tell you, and the dictionary and the encyclopedia will tell you, that Job was literally the son of Esau. Esau was king. He had the birthright until Jacob stole it. But Esau had the birthright. He got it from Nimrod. And so Job was his son and was the king of the world. He was a Canaanite. His wife was a Canaanite. His daddy was Esau, who married the Canaanite. So the woman's seed is Naamah, that goes back to Cain, that married Noah and got through the flood through Ham, and then to Nimrod. And then Nimrod was the one who built the Great Pyramid. This is Osiris, the mighty hunter. He has the birthright. Now, Esau murdered him. Who murdered the good guy? Set murdered Osiris. Set is Jacob, and Jacob had Esau. So Set is Abraham's line. Set's the one that murders the good guy, Nimrod. So the woman's seed was cursed by Yahweh to be banished for seeking knowledge and eternal life, wisdom. Elijah raised up the widow's son, the heir, Horus. But if you look at Job, he celebrates birthdays. They had 12 birthdays, 12 children. His wife is the conscious mind who wants to curse deity and die. It mentions he had a lot of cattle and sheep because he was a shepherd, the shepherd of the sheep, which are the people of his kingdom. So his house is destroyed, his age or his kingdom, because the accuser was trying him in that age. So these stories in the Old Testament are true stories about things that we don't understand. Why is the accuser accusing Job? Because he's trying to see if he's worthy. But you see, the birthdays and the weddings, the cake and the wine, the marriage feast is the sacrament. Job was the king of the world, the Melchizedek of the lineage of Esau, who received the birthright from Nimrod. Job was the king of the world. So we have to wait till the stick of Ephraim and the stick of Judah are again one in our hand. Both the southern tribes and the northern have to come back together again. We have to synchronize the Gentile rites, which is the 10 tribes that were scattered in all the world, went to Syria and then went to over the Caucasus Mountains, went all the way to Japan, China, they went to Africa. All the nations were seeded and planted by the 10 tribes. See, people don't realize that there weren't hardly any people over there in China at that time until Israel went there and populated all of China, Japan, Indonesia, all the world, America, Africa is all populated by the 10 tribes. And all of them are what we call the pagans, and they have the pagan rites and symbols. They rever the feminine nature. We have to unify the Gentile rites with the Jewish rites to find the unity. And then we can celebrate the wedding feast and the birthdays that Job celebrated to remind us of the mysteries that are lost. So the divorce is the separation of our understanding. In astrology, we have the original language or temple instructions, the path or wisdom of Sophia, the divine feminine. So having said that, this original language tells the plan of salvation. The time is at hand means that we are in the trial of fire. The judgment that ends with the final war, the Great Tribulation of 3.5 years, at the end of that 2,000-year age is what the apostles were telling us about and alluding to, of the Antichrist. And yeah, John was saying, it is the last hour. But he was talking about the last hour of that age. And he was saying there are many Antichrists. And not only has one already come, because there's many, he's saying there is going to be a greater Antichrist at the last hour of this age that just began. If you read through there, you'll see that's what he's saying. So the Bible is written in a language that tells this story, which is a prophecy. What is a prophecy? Well, a prophecy is uttered by a prophet. A man who is a prophet is not some randomly gifted, talented person. It is an initiate. He learns how to use the Urim and Thummim. He becomes an interpreter. Interpreter of what? The interpreter of destiny, of astrology. To know your destiny is to understand what was already written in the book of life. So to become an interpreter of the destiny is one who knows the times and the seasons. Daniel knew that, and he sealed up the book, and that's why when Christ came, they had lost all that knowledge because it was sealed. They couldn't understand it. So to understand the times and the seasons, which is prophecy, you have to be a diviner. The knowledge is not some hidden talent. The conclusion is the appointed time is at hand, and it meant the age of fire, the age of Aries. The end of the age was Pisces, and these were warnings that were written upon the end of the ages, plural, Pisces and Aries. We begin the new day soon. We were in the light's early dawn in the 1st century, and we are still in the light's early dawn in 1776. But now we're about to receive the twinkle of the Alcyon star light in our king's chamber, the pineal and the ophthalmus, which will trigger the pituitary gland in the queen's chamber and send the energy of life down through the cranial nerves to the lower body. The 7 chakras being the 7 glands from pineal, pituitary to the thyroid to the heart, which is the hearth. The woman reigns over the heart or the hearth, the queen's chamber. And she's equally ruling, not just the head, but you rule the head and the heart together. And the liver, and then the kidneys, and finally the gonads, each ruling over 12 houses going down and up the spine, carrying the Christ child to the cross at the vagus nerve. All humans are developing the pineal gland right now. It's not something you got to sit in the corner and go, oh, bang your head up against the wall. The pineal gland, the sun that's in our solar system, will ignite during the new age when we get that glimmer of light, when it lines up with Alcyon, our mother, and Orion, Osiris, our father in heaven. When that cycle comes around, it will initiate all of our pineal glands, which will initiate our pituitary, which is the queen's chamber. So each ruling over 12 houses going down and up the spine, carrying the Christ child. All humans are developing the pineal gland. By the new age of the Taurus, we will have the wedding, and Mercury weds Venus, and we'll have the latter rain, or the joy. This is an absolute breathtaking synthesis of astrotheology, friends. It is psychology, it is alchemy, it is the Hermetic linguistics. We are reconstructing the Adamic language, the original system where the stars, or the macrocosm, the body, the microcosm, and the word, the vibration, were a single unified map of destiny. The link then between the at hand and the chronology of the Anu, or the annual, or the Horus, is found in the mechanism of the appointed time. The Greek words for at hand, engikon, and the Hebrew karob both function as technical terms for proximity within a circuit. The annual, the word annual comes from the Latin annus, circle, ring, which mirrors the Egyptian Anu, the city of the sun Heliopolis. Every year, Horus resurrects his father Osiris by reaching the spring equinox in Aries. The Chronos hand, the hand is the gnomon, the pointer on the sundial. In the language of the birds, phonetic Kabbalah, at hand means the gnomon has reached the moedim, the fixed appointments of Genesis 1:14. It is the hand of the king, the hour hand of Horus, signaling the trial of fire, Aries Mars, because it has reached its peak. The archery, the archons, and the bull's eye. So these are all terms for archery. The archer is Orion. He's the celestial archer. And if he misses the mark, which is all of us, the Aryan race, if we fall out or we miss the mark of alignment with Taurus, the bullseye, if we miss the mark, we fall out of alignment with the Taurus bullseye. The appointed archons are the rulers, the archers who govern the 36 deacons, deca, 10 degrees. Thoth is the chief scribe who appoints these 72 governors. The Greek word for opportune time is kairos. In the ancient imagery, kairos is the youth with a lock of hair on his forehead. You must grab him by the forelock as he passes. This is the at-hand moment, the window where the archer, Orion, and the mark, Taurus, align. The psychological wedding, the physiological wedding, the interior pyramid. The description of the internal Great Pyramid is the secret of the ages. The king's chamber, pineal optic thalamus. This is where the Alcyon twinkle, the Christ light, enters. The queen's chamber, pituitary. This is the feminine womb that receives the electrical impulse from the pineal. The vagus nerve, the path. The sacred oil, chrism, descends the spine, the 33 degrees of the Freemasonic ladder, 33 vertebrae, and must be raised back to the place of the skull, Golgotha, to trigger the wedding, or the Arios Gamos. The 7 glands, these are the 7 churches of Asia, and the 7 stars of the Pleiades within the body. When the hand points to the hour, these glands are inspected by the rising energy. The reunification, Ephraim and Judah. The divorce that we're talking about is the separation of the intuitive feminine, the gentle spirit, from the legal masculine Jewish letter. The stick of Joseph and the stick of Ephraim, or the lost tribes, which is Ephraim, planted as seed to become the nations, and the stick of Judah, the preserved law priesthood. The hand, when these 2 sticks become one in your hand, Ezekiel 37:19, it represents the synchronization of the solar and lunar calendars, the wedding of the Jewish Moedim and the Gentile wisdom of Sophia. The conclusion, the end of the ages, plural, is the convergence of the Piscean age of grace and the Aryan age of fire. We are currently in the 3.5-year Great Tribulation, or we're almost there. We're approaching it. I think we may already have entered. Perhaps sometime here in May, we're going to enter into that. Not necessarily as a world war, but it will be the final winnowing of the human consciousness. And the at hand is the pituitary, the queen, preparing for the arrival of the pineal, the king, in 2030, or around that date, perhaps even sooner, which is the 2,000-year Pentecost, the hand of Horus, which clicks into the first deacon of Taurus in the latter reign of Mercury, Thoth, and the Word, who weds Venus, the beauty of the earth. The trial ends, the joker, the fool, initiate completes the deck, the crown is placed upon his regenerated head. So then we understand that the 144,000 represents the first fruits of those who have successfully synchronized their internal Great Pyramid before the celestial hand of the Horus strikes the appointed hour. The geometry of the 144,000, the number itself is the harmonic code in the measurement of the Great Pyramid. The exterior was originally covered in 144,000 highly polished casing stones. They were living stones, and we are the living stone. The individuals who have polished our character, raised the chrism, and are shining our lights. We are sealed in our foreheads with the promised Holy Spirit, as it says in Revelation 7:3, which is a physiological description of the pineal optic thalamus activation. Once this twinkle from Alcyon is received, the mind is no longer subject to the archons of the lower houses. In 2030, or somewhere around that date, it could be sooner, Pentecost will come, or something that is pre-Pentecost, but there will be a celebration. We're certainly moving towards the great wedding, but we will celebrate the coming of the new age, which will be a completely different thing that we've been going through, and we will have immortalities. We get our immortality at the wedding, so I suspect that the wedding is kind of the whole process. So it's the final hour or the final call for the stewards. As the earth enters the Taurus field, the vibration increases. These who are at hand with the spirit will experience the wedding or the Arios Gamos. The inspection, those who have not clothed themselves with the white robes or the purified nervous system may find the increased frequency of this Taurus age to be a trial of fire or a great tribulation. But the 144,000s, the ambassadors of the new age, when Mercury, Thoth, and Venus, Sophia wedding occurs, the first deacon of Taurus, these individuals become the sticks of Joseph and Judah made one. They bridge the gap between the divine word and the physical earth. As we've noted, we are transitioning from being the fool, the knave, the traveler, to being the king, the initiated ruler, the ace in the hole. It's the secret knowledge of Christ within, the power to overcome the lower suits of the fortune of destiny. The at hand is no longer a future threat. It is our current physiological reality. But I'm going to leave it there. I've got more to say. We'll be doing videos on this all the time. We're going to be talking more and more about this, putting all these things together for you, and trying to help others see. I hope Josh will find this interesting and study it and look it over and tell me what he thinks. Derek Jester, I hope you'll look this over and tell me what you think. Jacob, on the Jacoby Jacob channel, look it over, please, and tell me what you think. Ashley Hayes, let me know what you think. And I'll try to get this sent out to as many YouTubers and TikTokers as I can, because if this information could get out, the world would literally awaken overnight. So I'm going to let you go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. You know the Lord loves you. His grace and His peace will be with you. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.